What's up, Taiwan? I'm Louise with 10 minutes of news from here in Taiwan and around the world. The holiday season is just around the corner, but people in Taiwan are increasingly worried about the economy and their ability to buy gifts. According to the latest figures, Taiwan's Consumer Confidence Index has fallen to the lowest level in over a decade. Bing Wong has more.
All over the world, rising inflation and growing interest rates have hit consumers hard. And that's no different here in Taiwan. In fact, in November, the Consumer Confidence Index dropped to the lowest in 13 years. The Consumer Confidence Index, or CCI, measures the level of confidence people have in employment prospects, family finances, food prices, economic climate, stock market, and purchasing goods in the next 6 months. On the streets of Taipei, people did not hold back from sharing their opinions.
物价飞涨很多人的薪水都没涨啊。薪水没有涨的话，那你物价涨，他们就不敢消费啊。这个是一个大环境的关系啊。
比较穷的人买了真的有辛苦啊，什么都涨，涨了有的没有钱的真的很辛苦。
Economists say the drop in CCI is definitely being felt by families in Taiwan.
消费信心的调查其实应该是有在反映这部分所产生的影响，就是出口跟制造业它逐渐转弱，那所以造成那个就是家庭经济有在持续恶化。
Experts say the CCI is expected to fall further as Taiwanese exports will likely drop because of rising inflation. So that means prices won't balance out until inflation and interest rates come under control. So in the meantime, Taiwanese people will be feeling the financial pinch for a long time. As I Zhou and Bing Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's National Communications Commission says that it's received multiple complaints about how election results were reported by some local media outlets.
目前为止，我们到今天中午，我们收到了5位的民众申诉案，大概是针对于票数的部分，可能某些候选人在某个时间点，大概持续了一段时间，他的票数比较没有变化，可是其他的候选人部分票数是有增长的。
The complaints come after Taiwan wrapped up local elections on Saturday. As much of the nation was glued to their television screens, viewers noticed that some media outlets' figures differed significantly from the official numbers. The Central Election Committee has said there were no abnormalities during Saturday's official vote count. Taiwan is teaming up with Belgium to fight drug smuggling. The two countries worked together to seize over 7 kilograms of ketamine hidden in parcels from Europe. The drugs have a street value of over $300,000. 5 people have been arrested in connection with the drug bust. Ketamine smuggling is increasingly common. As it is a controlled drug in parts of Europe, authorities say ketamine can be easier to obtain and transport abroad than other substances. Turning now to international news. People around the world have been showing solidarity with a wave of protests in China. Protesters in cities such as London, Tokyo and Sydney called for Chinese leader Xi Jinping to step down. Among the demonstrators were Chinese citizens living abroad. China has recently been rocked by protests against strict zero COVID measures. In some cities, protesters have been heard openly calling for China's government to resign, a level of civil disobedience that hasn't been seen since before Xi took charge in 2013. To find out more about the protests and how Beijing may respond, our reporter James Chater spoke to Jia Ian Chong, an associate professor of politics at the National University of Singapore.
How will the protesters deal with this added police presence and some of the restrictions we've seen on social media use? Where do you think it goes from here?
So I think the authorities are trying to control the protests and get it all under some more restriction, such that it finally sort of dissipates and wears out. I suppose for the protesters, it's a matter of how much risk they're willing to bear, and how much they think they want to challenge their authorities. So I think if based on the sort of interaction that I've been seeing, I think the protests will sort of dampen down a little. They may be sort of sporadic and sort of come up here and there, unless some other incident really triggers people to get upset, right, for the frustration to bubble over again.
As you mentioned, even if the protests are quashed in the near term, this underlying frustration with restrictions on daily life seems like it will continue. How do you see that tension being resolved going forward?
They're going to find it very difficult to back away from COVID-0 until they really have the pandemic there under control. This is because Xi has basically owned the zero COVID policy, right? He has attached it to his own legacy. What we have with this current round of calls seems to be a recognition among some, I wouldn't say all, among some, that the COVID restrictions originate from the system that the PRC has, which limits oversight of executive authority. One thing to watch is whether the unhappiness with the COVID-0 policy and the protests provide some sort of, I guess, inspiration or sense among the Chinese population that they can push back against some of the more draconian measures that the Xi Jinping leadership has been imposing on them.
In the course of these protests, some people were openly calling for Xi Jinping to step down. How does the Chinese president recover from this moment?
The stepped up controls, both physically and also in terms of censorship online, is a reflection of, I suppose, the unhappiness of the state and the party towards calls for the party to step down and for the state chairman to back down as well. I guess the tactic that they've been using so far is to clamp down and try to talk about these issues because just talking about them would potentially give more attention and more oxygen, and also suggest to the protesters and their sympathizers that there is some traction to using that language and pushing forward. I'd have to say that previously with protests in China, often what would happen is that the local leader would get blamed and removed, right? And someone else would step in and implement largely the same policies but slightly looser. Now, because of this, the tightness of the tie between Xi Jinping and the COVID-0 policies, that becomes much more difficult, right? It's much more difficult to blame the local leader for misimplementation.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has announced a change in his country's stance towards China.
We also need to evolve our approach to China. Now, let's be clear, the so-called golden era is over, along with the naive idea that trade would automatically lead to social and political reform. But nor should we rely on simplistic Cold War rhetoric. We recognise China poses a systemic challenge to our values and interests, a challenge that grows more acute as it moves towards even greater authoritarianism.
Now, the golden era was a phrase former British Finance Minister George Osborne used to describe the state of UK-China relations back in 2015. But recent incidents, including the arrest of a BBC journalist covering protests in Shanghai, have strained the two countries' ties. UK opposition parties have criticised Sunak for not being hawkish enough on China, and his statement calling out China's increasing authoritarianism has failed to stem criticism. A Labour Party official accused Sunak of flip-flopping on China. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, we leave you with a rainbow flag at Copacabana Beach. It's Rio's Pride Parade after a 2-year break because of COVID. I'm Louise Watt. Take care, and I'll see you next time.